And tonight here on the Hill, Donald Trump is talking Uncle Sam, revealing how much he wants you to pay in taxes and why Elon Musk is a part of his plans. How the Harris campaign is responding to it all tonight. Plus, we are speaking with someone else who will be on the ballot. Here on the Hill, does the Libertarian Party think it can tip the race one way or another? We're live with its presidential candidate. Plus, the White House says no pardon for Hunter Biden. So why did he just plead guilty? And you're probably ready for some football, right? How the wife of the NFL's top quarterback is now in the middle of politics. Biggest game. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. You are watching the most politically unpredictable show on all of television. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, welcome to Washington. 61 days to go until Election Day. A live look right now in two states that are probably going to determine who's the next president of the United States. Pennsylvania there on your left, Arizona on your right. Tim Walz set to speak in Erie, J.D. Vance in Phoenix. When those two take to the microphones in moments at some point this hour, we will listen live here on the Hill right along with you. But we begin tonight with your money. Donald Trump unveiling today how he would want to handle the economy should he get a second turn in the White House. And there is a lot to dive into. Everything from Uncle Sam to Elon Musk. Among his proposals, the former president said before the New York Economic Club today that he would extend the tax cuts that he signed into law in his first year in office, while removing taxes on tips and Social Security checks. He vowed to lower the corporate tax rate to 15%, so long as companies produce in the United States. He also said he would increase tariffs if companies try to outsource. Now, Trump said he would halt unspent money on the current administration's climate initiatives. He would ban home loans for illegal immigrants and bring Elon Musk into the federal government to try to set up an agency to look into government waste.
I will create a government efficiency commission tasked with conducting a complete financial and performance audit of the entire federal government and making recommendations for drastic reforms. And Elon, because he's not very busy, has agreed to head that task force.
All right, so you could say this is version 2.0, or at least an attempt at it. Sprinkle in some Musk, his pledge to embrace crypto, and his attempt this time around to seemingly offer more things for free. Our panel is standing by. We continue to keep our eyes on the two number twos, but we begin tonight with Tim Murtaugh, senior advisor for the Trump campaign. Tim, hello. First time here on the Hill. Nice to see you and speak with you as always, Tim. Thanks for being with us.
Good to see you, Blake. Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right. So let's talk about some of this, because I've heard from Republicans a lot in the last few weeks. If Kamala Harris says she's going to do it now, why didn't she do it in the last 3.5 years? Let me flip that the other way. Donald Trump says he wants to lower the corporate tax rate to 15%. If he couldn't do that in 2017, Tim, why should we believe that he could do it now?
Well, Blake, I think the biggest thing about this election that sets up the Donald Trump's advantage is that people have had the chance to live through both administrations. First the Trump administration and now the Biden-Harris administration. People know that Donald Trump is a tax cutter. He passed the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It was the largest tax cut in the history of this country. He is absolutely known as a tax cutter, and the fact that he's going to now lower taxes even more should be celebrated. Yes, he's going to do it even more. This is not a case of why didn't he do it the first time? He did do it the first time, and now he's going to do some more of it. And this sets up
But he didn't get it to the level that he's talking about now, and I guess if not then, why now?
Blake, the United States had the strongest economy in the world before COVID struck the world, and it was because of Donald Trump's policies. We now see the complete reversal of those policies. Kamala Harris says that she'll let the Trump tax cuts expire. He will not. He's adding more tax cuts on top of that. If this race boils down, I am so glad we are having this conversation, to be honest with you. If this race boils down, if this race boils down to who Americans trust to make life more affordable for them, for everyday Americans, if that's the conversation that we have, Donald Trump wins this race in a walk. Let's look at
Trump
the corporate tax thing that she's talking about, that we're talking about. Cutting the corporate rate to 15% only for companies that keep jobs in the United States and produce their products in the United States is a way to grow jobs in this country. Kamala Harris would raise the business tax rates. That's a great way to grow jobs in other countries. That's what this election is.
Yeah, and these are part of the differences. Let me ask you, Tim. Donald Trump talks about no taxes on tips. He talks about no taxes on Social Security checks. That costs money, right? Because it's not a revenue driver. We're not collecting those funds. Here was Donald Trump in 2016.
I just disagree with that. I don't accept.
Hold on. Let me ask you this though, because here was Trump in 2016, where he talked about he was going to reduce the debt over the course of 8 years. It was 19 trillion then. It's 35 trillion and counting by the second now. What happened to that Donald Trump? Because I don't hear him talking about that anymore.
Well, you just teased the news that he made today about Elon Musk and taking up Elon Musk's idea and putting together a commission to look at government inefficiencies. Elon Musk is a pretty smart guy. In addition, he's going to stop the Green New Deal dead in its tracks because you know that Biden and Harris tried to smuggle the Green New Deal inside the poorly named Inflation Reduction Act. All that stuff will end and he will recoup any unspent funds from that. That is already a massive savings of about $1 trillion. I haven't done exactly the math on that, but all of these things will get written into legislation. Donald Trump is running to be president. He's not running to be president and a member of the House and Senate and all of Congress at the same time. He sets the agenda. And absolutely, the tax cut package of 2017 produced a massive amount of new revenue into the federal government. When you cut taxes, economic activity increases, tax revenues increase to the federal government. That's the way it works.
Yeah, it's part of the argument that Republicans certainly make. And, I would just note deficits in fiscal year 2018 under Trump, $779 billion. Fiscal year 2019, $989 billion. That's the other side of it. But let me ask you about Elon Musk, because at one point, Tim, as you remember, and I do, being at the White House, Elon Musk was on a presidential commission with Donald Trump, and he walked after Trump got out of the Paris Climate Accord. And I wonder if there's any assurances that Elon Musk won't just do the same if there's another Trump administration.
I mean, look, I think if you take a look at what Elon posts on X every single day, I think that he is very, very much in full voice in support of the policies that Donald Trump is pursuing and very much against the policies that Kamala Harris is pursuing. This boils down to a very simple equation when we're talking about economic questions. Who do Americans trust to steward the economy? Donald Trump, who gave us the best economy in the world, or Kamala Harris, who is part of the team that gave us massive inflation? It's a pretty easy choice. I will take this argument all day long.
I hear you lay it out, and I hear you lay out the choice. As you know, Tim, there are Republicans who are begging Donald Trump to just stick to the policy, stick to the issues, stick on message. Trump said this at one point today during the New York Economic Club. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
That would be a terrible thing, wouldn't it? Putting the wife of the president of the United States in jail. But they view it differently, I guess, nowadays, but that's okay. And they always have to remember that two can play the game.
Two can play the game, he says. What does he mean by that?
Well, I'm not going to try to fill in blanks there, but I would say that what you saw just there is a man who's had the entire strength of the federal justice system arrayed against him. You have people actively trying to put him in jail. This is not hyperbole. You have a judge who is ready to try to put him in jail later this month. The lawfare that has been engaged against Donald Trump simply because he had the nerve to run for president a second time. Once you accept the premise that none of the charges or any of the convictions against Donald Trump would have ever occurred or even been contemplated if he were not running for president again. Once you arrive at that, then you know that all of it is completely illegitimate. So if the guy gets a little bit irritated for the entire strength of the federal justice system and a variety of states also coming after him simply because he's running for office, I mean, would not also be annoyed by that a little bit and maybe make an offhand remark from time to time? I think I probably would.
Tim Murtaugh, senior spokesperson for the Trump 2024 campaign. We used to do this all the time in 2020, Tim. Nice to see you back here once again. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill. You got it. All right, joining me today here on the Hill throughout the hour, Hogan Gidley, former Principal Deputy Press Secretary in the Trump administration, Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor, former chairman of the D.C. Democratic Party, Lori Watkins is a Democratic strategist and former policy advisor to President Obama, T.W. Origi, former communications aide to Lindsey Graham and Mike Pompeo. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. We continue to await Tim Walz and J.D. Vance when they get to the microphones in Pennsylvania and Arizona. We will get out to them. Donald Trump talking the economy. I'll get to you two Republicans. You know Tim well. What did you take away from what you just heard there and from what you heard out of Donald Trump today?
I think Tim is probably a good guy, but he's out of touch with reality.
How so? Because
of the economy. Even Bloomberg, and I took notes on this, Bloomberg did an assessment of his tax cuts. You know, that blew an $8 trillion hole in the debt ceiling in 2016, 2017 that we're still living with. Bloomberg says tax cuts would cost more than almost all federal agencies. His tariff plan would add $524 billion in additional costs for U.S. Americans and reduce jobs by 684,000. That's a third party. Not Donald Trump or Democrat looking at that.
By the way,
that's not good for the economy.
To be clear, Joe Biden has kept all of Donald Trump's tariffs in place. He hasn't touched them. Kamala Harris
would add to them.
Hasn't touched them. And Kamala Harris, I mean, every administration, they blow through debts and deficits. That's not stopping anytime soon.
So to build off what you just said about the tariffs, I would like to see the reaction from the voters that Trump is trying to maintain support from, which are those folks that buy a lot of their goods from stores like Walmart, for example, where a lot of those goods are made overseas in China. So they're going to see those prices. We're talking about lowering inflation costs. Those prices are going to absolutely start to increase under a Trump plan. And I don't think anyone wants to see that.
We don't know what prices are going to do.
But most economists,
there's analysts and economists saying that's exactly what's going to happen.
Is it not?
I've looked at the research.
Is it not a fair question to ask if Trump couldn't do it in 2017? Why do we believe he's going to do it now?
Completely unfair.
How so?
He did the things he said he was going to do the first time around. He did lower the taxes on this country.
He did lower
the corporate tax rate. Of course, he did bring jobs back. He did all those things. Now what he's saying is, in the second term, I'll do even more of those things. There is nothing wrong with that. What Kamala Harris is saying is basically, look, I know I ruined everything for you guys the first time around. You're paying more for gas and for groceries. The border's wide open. There are wars breaking out all over the world. You like that? I'm going to make it even worse the second time. So she's doubling down on policies that really hurt the American people. As far as the government's concerned, it's adorable that you think for 2 seconds that these economists and these people can predict all these things. It was the 51 intel agencies, of course, that told us the Hunter Biden laptop was, of course, fake. Now these same economists who the first time around said that the Trump tax cuts would cost us $2 trillion for the federal government. The federal government actually gained $1.58 billion because of his tax cuts. This is so obviously simple for the Donald Trump campaign to point to where are you now versus where were you then.
But they didn't put...
Hogan's exactly right. These policy points put out during a campaign are starting points of negotiations. Donald Trump succeeded in his negotiations of lowering tax rates for all Americans. I'm a believer in the Laffer curve. Lower taxes.
Well, you're going Laffer curve on me.
It's true.
Okay.
It's true. After Reagan and after Bush tax cuts, we saw government revenue go up and growth go up. We talk about prices. Prices will go down when there's more competition in the market. We will not put Soviet-style price controls on businesses, which will hurt the American economy. It's two completely different visions for this country. Less government, more government.
Do you want Elon Musk in the United States government?
In the capacity that he mentions, absolutely.
You want Elon Musk in the United States government?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because you're talking about a government that every year loses about $70 billion in Medicare fraud, $100 billion they admitted to in COVID relief fraud. There's so much bloat and waste in the government. That's one thing. But the fraud that exists in this federal government costs us trillions every year.
Not trillions.
If this guy can get to the bottom of it, or at least make a big chunk out of it, absolutely. Why would you not want the government to run more efficiently?
He cannot serve in the government in any way, shape, or form because he's got huge conflicts. He's got these huge government contracts, and he's got to either put them in a blind trust or give up the company or do something. Right. So that's just a pipe dream.
And absolutely, I think this is just Trump trying to put lipstick on a pig once again by adding people like Elon Musk, who you heard what he said. Isn't he smart? Isn't he this? And isn't he that? He's lost the value of Twitter's gone down 71% since he purchased it.
Put a man in space in under 5 years.
And under the Kamala tax plan,
And so that
the government
qualifies
would owe
him to serve in the government.
That's right.
Hold on, time out. There's a lot to get to with Elon Musk. Obviously, you can't deny whether you like what he's done with Twitter or not. One of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time, though. He is obviously someone you could talk about all day. Show me real quick, if we can, for our audience here on NewsNation. J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, both speaking right now at the exact same time. Tim Walz is there in Pennsylvania. J.D. Vance is in Phoenix. Tim Walz here, then we'll dip into J.D. Vance. Let's listen live here on the Hill.
The American southern border is a disaster.
And on behalf of the Vice President, myself, to each of you, thank you. Look, there are a million places you could be with your time, your talent, and your treasure. You came out here. You came out here to stand next to neighbors, some friends, some new folks you met. You came out here. My God, it's 2 hours from kickoff, people, and you came out here for the NFL season. But you came out here, as the Vice President always says, for a simple and beautiful reason. You love this country. That's why you came. That's why you came. And I am incredibly grateful for it. But look, I always, some of you know, and I got to tell you, I'm just going to go ahead and say the coach signs warm my heart. Thank you. They warm my heart. A lot of years. I tell people, never close the yearbook. That state championship is as fresh today as it was 25 years ago. But the great thing about it is teaching, coaching, everything. It's that first week, the new start, the opportunities to a new season. Everything's fresh, clean slate. Anything's possible. All the things are there. We're all undefeated at this point in time with the opportunity to build something better for ourselves. That's what it is, to build something better. So I think all of you are here and you feel it. And for the young people who are here, look, between the last election, COVID, and the last 9 years of this nonsense after that guy came down a gold escalator, they've tried to tell you that this can't be joyful, this can't be fun, this can't be hopeful, this can't be positive about the future. Well, we reject that, and it took Kamala Harris to come onto the scene to tell us this is a joyful thing we're doing. This is hopeful. People are starting to figure this out. From her first day as a prosecutor, then to a district attorney, then to the attorney general of the largest state in the nation, then to a United States senator, and then to vice president of the United States. Yeah, she's qualified. Let me know that. She's qualified. But and she does this work waking up every day, doing it for the people of this country. She's the one. She's the one who took on the
All right, so we told you here on the Hill that you would be able to listen to both sides. The Democratic vice presidential candidate, the Republican vice presidential candidate. Tim Walz there in Pennsylvania. We started with him. He was a little earlier into his speech. We thought we might get something of substance. J.D. Vance now in the state of Arizona, now into his speech as well. Let's listen live to the other side of the aisle. J.D. Vance, Arizona.
Now, here's what we're going to do on top of it. We are going to re-implement deportations in this country. We're going to finish that beautiful border wall along the state of Arizona and everywhere else. We are going to stop catch and release, and we're going to stop giving Medicare benefits and health care benefits to illegal aliens. They deserve to go to American citizens, not the people who have no right to be in this country. Now, that is the Donald Trump agenda, and it's simple common sense. And it's one of the reasons why Donald Trump has gotten endorsements from across the political spectrum. You know, we've got on the Trump team, we've got people like Nikki Haley and Brian Kemp, and we've also got RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. You know why? Common sense. Common sense is what unites the Republican ticket in 2024. You don't have to agree with me or Donald Trump on every single issue, but you know we are united in some basic common sense. We're going to close down that border. We're going to bring down the cost of housing and groceries for American citizens. We're going to try to persuade our fellow Americans instead of censoring them, and we're going to fire that crazy person, Kamala Harris. We're not going to give her a promotion. That's the common sense, unity view of the United States of America. Now let's just talk about some of the wages, some of the costs of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe just last month we had the largest fentanyl bust in the history of this country, $12.6 million of fentanyl. And let's talk just a little bit about the human cost of this, because these are not just statistics. $12.6 million, that's a lot of money, of course, and that's a lot of fentanyl. But let me tell you just a personal story. You know, a lot of you know where I came from and how I grew up, but some of you don't. I was raised by my grandmother, a working class Appalachian woman from Eastern Kentucky. She was a Spitfire. God bless you guys. Thank you. Now, Mamaw was an interesting study in contrast.
All right, so we've been listening to J.D. Vance, the Republicans' vice presidential candidate, Phoenix, Arizona, swing state there. And before that, Tim Walz, the Democrats' vice presidential candidate, swing state, Pennsylvania. Quick thoughts around the table. Hogan?
Yeah, went to the grocery store today, got a $350 bill. I tried to pay with Vibes. They didn't take it. So then I pulled out of my pocket Joy. Didn't take that either. This is the difference between the two candidates and the two campaigns, and I think it was pretty stark right there. One's just talking about feelings and whatever. One's talking about what they've actually done and what they're going to do. I think it matters.
Well, I don't think they've done all that, but if you spend $350 on groceries, you haven't shopped in quite some time. Have you?
I shop every week.
Right. So you had two grocery carts as opposed to one. For $350.
No.
Did you get any meat?
That's all it was, baby.
That's all it was? The point is that if you haven't shopped for groceries in a long time, you can run up a $350 bill. The fact that you spent $350 is more about what you're buying, not necessarily about prices that are trending downward.
What'd you hear there?
The argument.
I heard
That's one argument.
Moving forward. The other side, I heard despair, anger. It was like joy, and then like two emojis. I mean, stark contrast. Absolutely.
Well, it was too much at the beginning of Walz's speech to hear a lot, but seeing that Kamala Harris was caught today busing people in from Massachusetts to New Hampshire, I'm curious if a lot of those people at the Walz rally were from New York.
One of the things I love doing about this show and being here on NewsNation, we're going to show you both sides. We just showed you Tim Walz. We just showed you J.D. Vance. You can decide for yourself. Still to come here on the Hill, Hunter Biden back in court today, making a surprise plea in his federal tax case. We'll tell you what he said, whether or not this sets him up for a pardon. Plus, as Trump and Harris get ready to debate next week, we break down where each candidate stands on the key issues, one of the key issues. And Green Day, forced to leave the stage mid-concert because of a drone scare. How did all of this happen here, and how did they react? I'm Blake Berman. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. Stay with us. Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Today, a 14-year-old is being charged with 4 counts of felony murder for allegedly killing 2 of his schoolmates and 2 teachers at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. It is among the most heartbreaking of scenes this country deals with all too routinely. Children, educators, going to school, not everyone coming home to their families. Right now, as you know, we are in the middle of a presidential race. The question of how to stop this madness, how to try to stop this uniquely American problem evokes emotional debate, as it should. After all, we are talking about children, kids, all ages, elementary school, middle school, high school. Tonight, we want to take a look into where both presidential candidates stand on how they believe the issue of school violence and school shootings could hopefully one day be solved. We're looking at what they've said and what they have proposed. Let's start with Vice President Harris. She supports more states passing red flag laws, which are civil measures allowing family members and law enforcement to request a court order to temporarily remove firearms from someone who may be a danger to themselves or others. She also supports, as you can see here, more federal funding to make that happen. Now, the Biden-Harris administration launched what is called the National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Centers, which supports red flag laws. Vice President Harris currently oversees the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And as a candidate during her first run in 2019, she talked about removing police officers from schools. Here she was, for example, in 2019 when asked about reforming the criminal justice system.
What we need to do about demilitarizing our schools and taking police officers out of schools. We need to deal with the reality and speak the truth about the inequities around school discipline.
We have asked the Harris campaign if she still stands by that position. As of this evening, we have not yet heard back. Now, we do know that 2 school resource officers who received extensive training are being hailed as heroes for confronting the shooter in Georgia. According to local reports, they have more than 2,000 hours of training combined. Now, as for Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, he too has called for red flag laws. As president, he called for, quote unquote, hardening schools. On his campaign website right now, Trump, for example, says he would allow trained teachers to carry concealed weapons. He also supports using federal funding to hire veterans and retired police officers as armed school guards. Trump also says he would overhaul federal standards on disciplining minors, which he says would lead to safer classrooms. Now, as president, Trump made it known he was against the idea of gun-free schools.
It's time to make our schools a much harder target for attackers. We don't want them in our schools.
So that's where the 2 candidates stand. Will this be solved overnight? No. We know how this has played out here in Washington, from Columbine to Sandy Hook, now to Appalachia. But we also know there's probably many of you right now who are rightfully thinking about Georgia and thinking about your kids, their school, their future. So we wanted to present you with where the 2 stand. All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill. Can the Libertarian candidate change the outcome of a presidential election? You might not know the name, but he could be a big player here in November. He is Chase Oliver, the Libertarian presidential nominee. He's running against Donald Trump, running against Kamala Harris. He is live with us here on the other side of the break, and you are looking live at Erie, Pennsylvania, Phoenix, Arizona. Screen left, Tim Walz. Screen right, JD Vance. Campaigning this hour in 2 of the crucial states. All of this when The Hill on NewsNation returns. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Live look right now, JD Vance and Tim Walz, both out there on the campaign trail. Walz in Pennsylvania, JD Vance in Arizona, as we've been showing you here throughout the hour. The presidential race so tight, third-party candidates could possibly swing the election in key swing states. Now, the 2024 presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party is Chase Oliver. He could make a difference, especially in the battleground states of Pennsylvania and Georgia. Now, as for Libertarians, in 2016, for example, that party's nominee, Gary Johnson, received 4.4 million votes nationwide. In the 2020 election, the nominee, Joe Jorgensen, received 1.8 million votes. Right now, Oliver is on the ballot in at least 34 states. And joining us live from the swing state, his home of Georgia, the Libertarian Party presidential nominee, Chase Oliver. Chase, thanks for being with us here on the Hill.
Hey, thank you for having me. Look forward to speaking to you and speaking to your audience today.
Tell me what your goal is, Chase. You know where you're polling, which is, 0.5%, 1%, 2% nationwide. I just went through the numbers of sort of where libertarians have been in recent years. So I wonder what your goal is.
Well, first and foremost, my goal is to provide an alternative to voters so they can actually have a choice in the ballot that represents a lot of the concepts that actually founded this country and have made this country the economic engine of the world, free market principles, things that you're not getting from Donald Trump with his economic protectionism, nor from Kamala Harris with her price controls. And it's about time that we have an alternative on the ballot that actually speaks free market principles, the ideas of limited government. And we're just not hearing that from any other campaign. And a lot of voters want to hear those principles put forward, and we're giving them an option all across the country.
I wonder why it hasn't landed, though. Is it just simply a two-party system and that's the way this country is?
Well, I think voters are conditioned, much of it out of fear, to pick one side or the other or the lesser of two evils. But I remind voters as I travel across the country that when you pick a lesser of two evils, you're still picking evil. And if people, I hear all the time, oh, I would vote for you except you wouldn't win.
Do you think they're evil?
That,
you think they're evil, though? Like, I hear you say you're picking evil. You think...
I think much of what the two-party system provides is an invasive, overly intrusive, and abusive state that invades our liberty up and down, from the federal all the way down to the most local government. So, yeah, we want to fight back against the abuses of government that you're not getting from Republicans and Democrats who continue to bloat the debts, the deficits, the wars around the world using taxpayer dollars. There's plenty of evil to find in the Republican and Democratic Party that has not been addressed due to the nature of this binary two-party system.
So here's what Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, Chase, they both have released some of their economic ideas just in the last 2 days here. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
And we'll have the greatest sovereign wealth fund. We will build extraordinary national development projects and everything from highways to airports and to transportation infrastructure.
Under my plan, we will expand access to venture capital. We will support innovation hubs and business incubators. And we will increase federal contracts with small businesses.
Do you think, generally speaking, that either of them have it right going forward?
No, I think both of them look at economic issues and think the solution is going to be found in more government involvement in the marketplace. I would like to see an overall reduction in government involved in the marketplace. Let's lower the cost of doing business overall so it's easier to create a startup instead of having to increase incentives for small business. Let's just make it less expensive to start a small business on the government end. If we got government out of the way, you would see an explosion of jobs in the economy. That's just not happening because too often government stifles the innovation, they stifle the marketplace growth, and they stifle small businesses because they give all the advantages to those who lobby to them, the giant corporate interests at the expense of the mom and pop.
Let me leave you with this, Chase, and we're a little squeezed on time because we carried some live events. Pennsylvania, it could be the state that decides this election. And in at least one recent poll, you were running at 2%. In the Keystone State. We had our poll for the Hill and Emerson College that polled 950 people in Pennsylvania, and Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were separated by one voter, just to show you how close that is if you start multiplying that out. I wonder if you think that you could potentially tip the scales one way or another in Pennsylvania.
Well, one of the goals of the Libertarian Party is to be a disruptor of the two-party system, and whether it's one way or the other, we hope to disrupt this election enough to where voters can be provided more choices on the ballot. And let's change the way we vote. If we had ranked choice voting, there would be no so-called spoiler effect. But we have to make it hurt for the two-party system to give us that.
Can you say real quick, Chase, if you end up helping Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, which one you would rather help?
Either way, I don't feel like we're going to have a great commander-in-chief. I don't feel like we're going to have a great leader. Okay. So really, it's two sides of a terrible coin. I don't have a preference one way or the other.
Chase Oliver, thank you so much. Presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. He is going to be on the ballot in about 2/3 of the states in this country. Joining us live here on the Hill. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Do either of your sides there have any worries as it relates to Pennsylvania? Like, I'm seeing there Jill Stein 1, Chase Oliver 2, and this is a race that is purely coin flip.
Harris needs to worry about, and I know that she's focused on this, voters over 65. That's where she's trailing in Pennsylvania. And so I think once she can start to bring those numbers up, she's going to be in a much more solid foundation, solid footing in Pennsylvania than she is now.
The third parties hurt, both, whether they're right or left, they hurt. I'm sympathetic to the Libertarian cause, but they'll never go above that number. I think that number is highly inflated until they stop chasing off good candidates. You saw Gary Johnson got 4.4. Yeah. They flipped that ticket, would have got a lot more. Jill Stein and Cornel West are a bigger threat to Harris than he is to Trump.
Well, I don't think these factors, if you look at the polling in regard to Pennsylvania, Chase Oliver's at 2%, and Kamala's up to 51%, and Trump is 45%. I don't think they're going to be a factor because both sides have such significant following, lots of energy. They're fighting for, 10 to 15% of the vote generally, and these swing states are so close. They could be a factor as a practical matter, but in the end, those 10 to 15% voters who are undecided, they're going to have to go somewhere, and they're not going to the Libertarian or third party.
Trump got booed when he spoke before the Libertarians, and I wonder if he can somehow try to bridge the gap there, or if that's just gone and not happening.
I mean, possibly. I mean, he went there. That's half the battle. I think a lot of people would be too afraid to go into that room, but Donald Trump isn't afraid of much. Listen, I think it is interesting when you're talking about slivers of percentages in these states, though. Let's be honest. The last election was decided across 3 states by 42,000 votes.
Yep.
So these numbers can possibly matter.
Yeah, no, I mean, you talk about that polling with the Hill. It was literally 950 people in Pennsylvania separated by 1. And so if you go town by town, city by city, county by county, precinct by precinct across several millions, that's how you get to 10, 15, 20,000. Anyways, still to come here on the Hill. Hunter Biden, what is going on with him? Did you hear what happened today in his legal team, what they decided to do? That's on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation.
NewsNation Tuesday. Vice President Kamala Harris, former President Donald Trump, on the only network with respect for all Americans. Live coverage starts at 7/6 Central, followed by the ABC presidential debate simulcast. It's debate night with Chris Cuomo. Tuesday.
Leaving court in Los Angeles for the second day of his federal tax trial, Hunter Biden's legal team originally surprised the courtroom by offering a rare, what's known as an Alford plea, which would allow him to plead guilty to maintain his innocence. Now, Biden is pleading guilty without a deal with prosecutors to all 9 charges, including 3 federal charges of tax evasion. Now, right now, Hunter Biden is facing a maximum of 17 years in prison. Today, the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, was asked about a possible pardon.
On Hunter Biden changing his plea, does the White House have a comment at all, and does that change the president's calculus on pardoning his son?
It's no. It's still no.
There is not a parent in this country who doesn't believe that Joe Biden, who has repeatedly said he would not pardon or would not commute his son. Scott, there's not a parent in this country who believes that, including yourself.
I agree with you. I don't know how he gets out of that. One way to get out of it, though, if Kamala Harris wins, Kamala Harris can pardon him.
She wouldn't. Why would you put that on her right at the beginning?
I don't know. Maybe they cut a deal. But if she pardons him early in her administration, that would be best. Not when she starts to run for re-election. But remember, Hunter Biden's got a lot of Democratic support. These trumped up charges, forgive the pun, but these charges, there are a lot of Democrats who believe that, but for him being Hunter Biden, these charges never would have been brought. In fact, there was a deal to be cut, and it was the Republican pressure from the House and Senate that forced further prosecution of Hunter Biden.
You used to speak for the White House, the other prior administration, the Trump administration. Karine Jean-Pierre going out there saying, no, there's no pardon, again, when there's not a single parent in this country who believes that with any political leaning, it doesn't matter. So what's the position that she's in, and how should they be?
Well, look, I would, if Joe Biden were my boss, I'd ask him again before I gave that gaggle to make sure I was giving the answer, and I would attribute it to him because, as you know, in the media, attribution is your salvation. The president has said no. The president.
You could really go to the president on something like that and ask him?
I would 100% ask him because then it's me on the hook for lying to the press. I would attribute it to the president, as Karine Jean-Pierre did not do there. Now, that being said, remember, he's supposed to be sentenced in December. That's after the election, but before the inauguration of the next president. Right. So he could theoretically do this on the way out, and it causes no political harm to him or Kamala Harris.
None.
And
you're absolutely right.
There leaves time, building off what you just said, there's time to analyze what happens with the House and Senate. Who's in power, right? If you're talking about a possible Kamala Harris pardon. But I don't really think that she'd want to do something like that. If the House and Senate, she anticipated that there would be any political backlash, that they would start opening up investigations, and that would completely dilute, like, the beginning of her term.
It'd be a one-day story.
Yeah, I actually don't really think what KJP said today matters one way or the other. I think he's going to do it if he feels like it's right.
Because people don't believe it.
Well, and also, look, whoever the next president is should turn the page on the whole thing and show the grace of pardoning him. I actually believe that. It would actually make Trump look really high above it, and Harris would have the political capital to expend.
All right, by the way, 207 days after Super Bowl 58, the reigning champions finally take the field again. Football, NFL, starts tonight when the Chiefs take on the Ravens. And on the eve of the first game of the NFL season, Donald Trump is naming quarterback Patrick Mahomes' wife, thanking her for her support. It comes after Brittany Mahomes liked a couple of pro-Trump posts on social media. That, as you might imagine, sparked a little bit of backlash in some corners. Last week, she pushed back on what she called the quote-unquote haters. Now, in a Truth Social post yesterday, the former president weighed in, thanking her for, quote, so strongly defending me, adding, quote, what a great couple. See you both at the Super Bowl. There you go. All right. Did you see this, by the way? Green Day, famous band, being forced off stage during the middle of a song because of a security threat. Look at this video here. Lead singer Billy Armstrong running off the stage in Detroit due to what ended up being an unauthorized drone that flew a bit too close. But the show must go on. The band returned about 10 minutes later. Welcome to 2024, I guess. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins us on the other side of the break. Did you see what Vladimir Putin said today about our presidential race? That's coming up. All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that definitely caught our eye. The Russian president, Vladimir Putin, says that he wants Kamala Harris, or at least he suggested that he wants Kamala Harris to win the U.S. presidency, citing Harris's, quote, infectious laugh as one of the reasons for his support. Former President Donald Trump mentioned this earlier today, wasn't so sure of what to make of it.
I didn't know, was I supposed to call him up and say, thank you very much, I appreciate it. I don't know if I'm insulted or he did me a favor.
Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. Hello, Leland. You know, one of my favorite guests here on the show is Jack Barsky. I'm guessing you probably talked to him before. He's a former KGB agent. And the last time I had Jack on the show, he said to me, quote, everything Putin does is sending messages. And I wonder what you think Vladimir Putin was trying to do here.
It's a great question. We do know that Vladimir Putin plays 3D chess. I'm often reminded of the Russians saying that nothing's true, but everything's possible, right? And what Vladimir Putin wants is us having this conversation inherently. That is the goal of what he is doing, is to have the American public talking about him. We've seen over many, many decades the KGB and the Russians at all try to, quote unquote, interfere in American elections. And it is to sow discord and distrust in America.
All right, well, that does it for us here on The Hill.